Good afternoon. Welcome to episode 30 of Duval Rundown. My name's Gus Logue, joined right now by Hacker. Mia is going to be coming on later after she wraps up in the locker room, but we're going to break down the Jacksonville Jaguars' most recent loss, this time to the Minnesota Vikings in Week 10 at Everbank Stadium. It's kind of similar to last week's game against the Eagles, where even if it was technically a one-score loss, the final score wasn't really a good indicator of how the game went. Jacksonville was outgained in this game 402 yards to 143. Outgained, or the Vikings picked up 28 first downs compared to Jacksonville's 10, and the Vikings were on offense for 42 minutes of the game compared to 17 and change for the Jaguars. And so even though, again, it was a close game, one-score loss for Jacksonville, it definitely didn't feel as close as it actually was. And so, Hacker, welcome back to the show. Thanks, as always, for joining. Hacker will be going to Island Cigar Bar later with Leon Searcy and Coach Campo for the fifth quarter, so make sure to check that out on 1010XL. But yeah, Hacker, just immediate reactions. What was your kind of first or biggest takeaway from this game?
Well, they went 3-and-out on the opening series, right? I mean, we got that right again. And guess what? Next Sunday, they're going to get the ball first in the first quarter or first in the third quarter, and they will go 3-and-out because that is what the Jacksonville Jaguars do. Gus, 2 weeks ago, we sat here after the Green Bay game and felt like that was like the end of the season, right? Remember, we talked about the last gasp. I'm not a body language expert by any stretch of the imagination, but moments ago, seeing Doug Pederson run out of the middle of the field and shake Kevin O'Connell's hand, it did not look good body language-wise. I know Shad Khan's in town. His multi-million-dollar yacht is in downtown Jacksonville. That was a putrid offensive performance. And I don't care if Trevor didn't play. I mean, your job as a head coach and a coordinator and everybody on that offensive staff is to design a game plan that can win an NFL football game. The offense was pathetic today. And Doug Pederson's supposed to be an offensive mind. And if I'm the owner and I see that and I'm 2-8, if you're going to do something eventually, why wait? So I don't know. Maybe the next 24 hours could be pretty interesting because that was ridiculous today.
Yeah, it would be interesting. Shad Khan is honestly probably talking to Doug Pederson right now after the game. They usually have a little huddle up whenever Shad Khan is in attendance, so they're probably having some kind of discussion right now. Once Mia gets in here, we'll probably be able to learn a little bit more information about just what Doug Pederson's job security looks like at the current moment, because we've been saying on the show the whole year and throughout 1010XL. So, go ahead.
No, really, real quick. I don't want it to seem like it's all Doug Pederson's fault. All right. I think Doug Pederson has been a good coach when there's a statue of him in Philadelphia. But for whatever reason, Gus, it's not working here. All right. Is it the Christian Kirk injury? Well, if it is, that's a problem. Because they knew last year they couldn't replace Christian Kirk. So maybe that's more on Balky. All right. You lose Kirk again, and now you just can't functionally move the ball down the field. Brian Thomas Jr. did not touch the ball until the fourth quarter. How is that possible, man? I mean, again, Doug's going to fall on the sword because the coach is easier to fire during the year than the GM. I would think Balky's going to go at some point, too. I think it'll be a combo deal. I can't imagine Shad doesn't do that. But Doug will probably be the first domino, I would think. I mean, what about you?
Yeah, I think Doug and Press are kind of a tandem, and like they're going to go at the same time. It would be interesting, though, because I'm trying to think of like how often a general manager gets fired during the season, because I think if Doug Pederson doesn't get fired for the rest of the season, that almost might be some copium for Jaguars fans to be like, oh, then that maybe is a sign that it's just going to be a full, like one swift motion of Shad cleaning house and getting rid of everyone at the same time. So it'd be interesting to see if Doug ends up being the first person let go. I would assume that Press Taylor would be following him out the door, but I don't know necessarily if Trent Baalke would be also, especially again, just because it is still the middle of the season. But yeah, there's just like, I feel like no reason to keep Doug around anymore. I know that it's going to be pretty hard to put together an offense and kind of finish out the rest of the season if you're going to lose your head coach and your offensive coordinator. But I think the Brian Thomas Jr. thing is what just explains the woes with this coaching staff most, is that they've got this first-round rookie receiver that they obviously went out and spent significant resources on in the a first-round pick in the offseason, and then he's lighting up the NFL through the first 5 or 6 weeks of the year. He joined like Jamar Chase and just a handful of other receivers to have had 450 plus receiving yards and 4 touchdowns through his first 6 or so games. I think 7 games actually. So Brian has been amazing. And then like for some reason, ever since Christian Kirk has gone out, he has like 4 catches in that span since Kirk went down. And so I think it's just, I've talked before about how this coaching staff on the offensive side just doesn't adapt at all. And I mean that more so in general, where it's like, yeah, they've got some great stuff in their 2017 playbook, and they just haven't improved it or changed it enough since that time when Doug Pederson and Press Taylor won a Super Bowl against Bill Belichick back in 2017. But now, like, Christian Kirk goes down, and it's like, okay, like, first of all, you've got this first-round receiver who's lighting the league on fire, so maybe try to figure out how to get in the ball more rather than just continuing to stick him out on the perimeter of the field and then just say, oh, defenses were clouding him. Oh, defenses had a safety over the top. Yeah, that's super easy to do when he's on the perimeter the entire game. And that was like, there was these same issues last year with Calvin Ridley, where Calvin Ridley still got over 1,000 yards. So I think it was a pretty solid season for him, even if it was underwhelming compared to all the hype that he was getting in the summer before. But he was just getting stuck out on the perimeter with no motion, no free releases. Like, the coaching staff wasn't helping him at all. They're not helping Brian Thomas Jr. out at all now. They're not even helping out like Parker Washington. Like, Parker Washington's supposed to be just like a seamless plug and chug for Christian Kirk if and when Christian Kirk did go down. And now that that's happened, like, Parker Washington is even being used in the right ways, which it should be the easiest thing to do. And so players just not being used in the right ways. I thought that the defensive staff actually showed some adjustment today because they've been doing – Ryan Nielsen loves to have at least one safety back, and he usually only has one safety back. And today against Minnesota's pass-happy offense, that's – even if Sam Darnold is the quarterback, Kevin O'Connell, I think, is one of the better offensive play callers and just play designers in the league. And so Jacksonville went to a lot more 2 high safety coverages in this game to try to take away mostly Justin Jefferson, but really just the explosiveness of Minnesota's passing offense. And so, like, Nielsen, 12 points allowed. They did put up over 400 yards, but 3 touchdowns for Nielsen's unit, or 3 interceptions, pardon me, for Nielsen's unit, which is more than they had for the rest of the season combined. And so I thought it was a nice performance by the defense, especially considering the adjustment that the coaching staff needs to make going into this game. But there was just none of that whatsoever for the offensive coaching staff. Like, I already talked about the mismanagement of the receivers, but then also just the mismanagement of the game plan. I know that they did go out and score on their opening drive scripts for what felt like the first time all season, but they didn't do anything after that. They had, like, it felt like as many yards after that drive as they did on that drive. And so it felt like there was just really no answers or no reason to the way that they were calling the offense in terms of, like, oh, we need to protect Mac because the Vikings love to blitz a lot and they like to have a bunch of bodies up the line of scrimmage. And so, yeah, obviously the offensive performance for much of the season, but including today, has just been not good enough for the Jaguars. And again, I don't think there's any reasons that we've seen on the field to give the coaching staff, especially on the offensive side, a longer leash or to finish out the season with 7 or 8 games left or whatever it is. And so, I don't know. Do we have any good things to say, Hacker? Did you have any positive takeaways from this game?
No, I was just letting you go. You just threw a lot at me there. I'm trying to dissect everything. At the end of the day,
this is chat therapy, right? We're just venting out here.
Right. At the end of the day, I mean, to justify to your fan base to go to the rest of these home games, I mean, you got to sell tickets to these home games, right? I mean, Houston's still coming in here. Tennessee's still coming in here. The Jets are still coming in here. Why would you go to any of these home games if nothing changes? You're 2-8, right? I mean, you've lost 13 out of your last 16. The team's awful. I mean, let's call it what it is. They're awful. You got outgained on your home field by 250 yards. There was a point in the fourth quarter where Minnesota had run more plays in your territory than you had total plays in the game. And that stems off of last week where you didn't get a first down, you didn't get a first down until midway through the second quarter. I mean, this is Pop Warner stuff, Gus. This is middle school stuff. This is not NFL football. We're back in the days of Mike Mularkey. I mean, we're back in the days of Gus Bradley. I mean, this is what it is. In fact, some of these Gus Bradley teams would have been better than this. All the money that Shad Khan has invested in this team has just been flushed down the toilet by the general manager, by the coaching staff. The players on the field have not performed either, which is a bad judgment by Balky. And I get Trevor was hurt. They were 2-7 with Trevor. Okay, they had lost 12 out of 14 with Trevor. And in the NFL, when quarterbacks go down, coaches find a way. Minnesota, right? Sam Darnold's not their starting quarterback. They drafted J.J. McCarthy in the top, 12? And he was going to be their guy until he had a season-ending injury in training camp. But guess what? They've adjusted, and they're 7-2. You think about Justin Fields came in for Russell Wilson, and Pittsburgh got off to a great start. They adjusted. Um, Mason Rudolph. All right, Tennessee's not any good, but Mason Rudolph won a football game last week when Will Levis was hurt because that coaching staff, and they've come under a lot of fire in Nashville, adjusted. This coaching staff had circles coached around them. Kevin O'Connell's in year 3 in Minnesota. Doug Peterson's in year 3 here. Kevin O'Connell is by far and away the better coach, by far and away the better coaching job. Minnesota turned the ball over time after time after time, and it didn't matter because they still win the game.
Yeah. Not only did the
just
Jags get 0 points off of those turnovers, but then they had 3 turnovers themselves in their last final 3 drives. So it was just an abomination.
And it's okay to do something other than a half-bag dive on 1st and 10. I mean, it's okay to actually do something where you don't just hand the ball to ETN. Boy, Mitch Morse, that interior offensive line. Again, that's what's frustrating, all right? Because you, me, anybody with a microphone, the entire offseason, we talked about 3 things. The interior O-line, the pass rush, and the secondary. To anybody that would listen. But obviously Trent Baalke doesn't listen to 1010XL, and I can't blame him because he's been roasted and he will continue to be roasted until he's out of here. Because the interior offensive line we thought was going to be bad, and guess what? It is bad. They don't have anything after Hines, Allen, and Walker on the pass rush. And guess what? They don't have anything behind Hines, Walker, and Allen. Or Hines, Allen, and Walker. And then finally the secondary, they need to add a veteran. They added a veteran. Darby's not any good. It's a failure across the board, man. I don't know how else to really say it. We come up here and it's Groundhog Day every Sunday. It is a failure across the board. And I feel for the defensive guys. I can only imagine what that locker room's like right now. If you're a defensive player, you played your tail off, man. You got 3 interceptions. You held Minnesota out of the end zone, and that's the effort your offense gives you. Yikes. And you go to Detroit next week.
I was about to say.
Oh my gosh.
I'm going to go ahead and put my official prediction. I mean, maybe we'll get like a notification that Doug's been fired at any moment, but I'm going to say that he's going to get fired after next week's game because the Jags are in Detroit. Detroit is capable of blowing out any team, but especially when they're at their home stadium up there in Michigan. And so that just feels like it's going to be an ugly, ugly loss because they've had 2 ugly losses in the past 2 weeks between today and last Sunday. But again, they were both 1-score games where the Jaguars were able to make the final score look better than the actual game. And I don't think that's going to happen next week.
And look, if Trevor needs surgery, and again, we still don't know, there's all sorts of reports out there, there's no point playing through anything, right? I mean, the season's over. I mean, the season's lost. This is a lost season, one of the most horribly disappointing seasons in Jaguar history. There's 7 games to go. I don't care. I don't want Trevor to have surgery in January to where maybe there's a chance he's not around for the offseason program in April. I want him 110% in April when the offseason program begins. And if that means having surgery now, and again, that's just rumors, reports that he might need surgery. We really don't know. But if he does, if there's any cleanup needed whatsoever, do it now. There's no point in playing him amidst this nonsense of a season.
Yeah, the surgeries rumors are definitely swirling, but I do think it's interesting that Jay Gruden was technically the first to break the news that Lawrence was like potentially going to have surgery and be out for this week and for the rest of the year. And he was the one who said like surgery is coming. And so since then, like Ian Rappaport quote tweeted him and said, "Oh, like not so fast, hold on there." But yeah, we'll see. I think at this point, it's fair to not expect to see Trevor Lawrence again until next season. And I don't know who got in his ear and told him to do that, or whether like he really did get banged up and has a sore shoulder. That was a mouthful. I don't know, but whoever got him to get into this decision where he's potentially going to be kind of holding himself out for the rest of the year, if that is the case, I think is definitely a smart one because I wouldn't want to be playing for this coaching staff. I think you were talking about body language earlier. It seems like Mac Jones is even sick of this coaching staff, which is funny because he had just horrific offensive coaching during his time in New England. Even if Bill Belichick is the GOAT, they had some absurd offensive coordinators and play callers up there with the Patriots, and so he's used to bad coaching, but clearly was not a fan of it today. And to go back to your point about depth, like I think that's the biggest indictment on Balky is that like, yeah, when you're in the preseason and you're going 3-0 in the preseason and all of your stars are healthy, then it looks like a pretty solid roster, especially with 16 as a starting quarterback. But then as soon as a couple pieces start to go down, Tyson Campbell early in the year, Christian Kirk 2 weeks ago now, like it's just not enough. And that's really, I think, the biggest difference between like non-contenders and contenders is the depth on the teams. Obviously, you need like your fair share of superstars too to be able to pull you to the Super Bowl, but you really need a deep team because no team goes through the season fully healthy. And so, like you said, the depth at secondary and the offensive line and the pass rush has all been issues to us and anyone else with microphones since before the preseason. Like even with the shiny 53-man roster or the shiny 22 starters, like we all knew in sports radio that it just wasn't going to be enough depth. And then it's just funny how you were like listing off all of those backup quarterbacks who have actually succeeded for their teams this season. And it's funny because the Jaguars went out and got Mac Jones back in March because they thought CJ Beathard either wasn't good enough last year when he had to step in for Lawrence, or maybe was a little bit too injury prone. And so they went out and got a guy, and the guy just clearly is not good enough. And so I think Mac Jones.
Dennis Allen got fired last week, right, in New Orleans. Same timeline as Doug. Quick, off the top of your head, you know what Dennis Allen's record was in New Orleans? You know how many games he won?
This season or like all time?
It's 2.5 years on the job in New Orleans. Doug has won 20 games. How many do you think Dennis Allen's won? Or won in New Orleans when he was there?
I'll say 10.
He won 18.
Oh, wow.
Dennis Allen got fired for going 18-25 in New Orleans. Doug Pederson's now 20-24 in Jacksonville. Now, Doug has a playoff win. Allen didn't go to the playoffs, but Dennis Allen's record was 18-25, and he was shown the door last week in New Orleans. Doug Pederson, with this loss today, is now 20-24. It's kind of time, Gus, to be honest. And I got to tell you this too, and this sucks, man, because we got 7 more of these to do. We got 7 more Duval Rundowns. After the Sunday's games, we got 7 more fifth quarters, and we're going to love them, and we're going to do them, and we're going to break them all down. We're at the point now where wins are bad. That's reality. Wins are bad because wins are going to cost you draft picks, and you do not want this team to win 4 out of 5 at the end of the year. That's why I almost think you should cut ties with everybody now, because I don't want any inkling in Shad Khan's mind, not even the slightest twitch in his mustache, that's saying, oh, they won 4 out of 5. They're building confidence going into the offseason. A, I don't think you have to worry about that happening. But B, I think you erase any thought of that happening if you cut ties either now or after the Detroit game on Sunday. And again, it sounds like I'm blaming Doug for everything. It's not all Doug's fault, but he's going to be the first guy to fall. But a lot of people are going to fall for this, including the GM and basically the entire staff. I think they need to gut the thing and start over with Ben Johnson. You go with Ben Johnson, you give him a blank check, and if he says no, then at that point, I think you reach out to Cliff Kingsbury, Slowick in Houston. Give me a young offensive mind. Do not bring me Robert Saleh. That's what I don't want. I don't want any guy like that.
The Chargers defensive coordinator is doing some nice stuff. Jesse Minter over there in LA. I think Minter might be close to the top of my list of non-Ben Johnson candidates, because my question for you was going to be, if the Jaguars can't or don't get Ben Johnson, who would you want? But it seems like Johnson is definitely the guy at the top. And then Cliff Kingsbury, I would not have wanted at all before this season, but you got to give him credit for what he's doing in Washington with Jaden Daniels. I think Bobby Sloak's another good shout. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I think honestly, like the third show of Duval Rundown was just talking about future head coach candidates with Hayes Carline, because we've kind of known where the ship was going for a while. But like what you were saying with Doug, I think the only reason to keep him around past the bye week is because in the past he has shown the ability to turn around the Jaguars and go on like a really good stretch of games. But I'm right there with you, where you don't want to give him that opportunity, because if, say, the Jaguars do win 4 or 5 in a row, then like it's just going to give you false confidence, and you certainly do not want to go into next season with this coaching staff or front office.
I haven't talked to you since what he said last week about Trevor's injury. Look, I get that he likes to joke around a little bit. He likes to, have a smile in the press conference. But when he's asked a question about a left shoulder injury for a right-shouldered quarterback, a right-arm quarterback, and how's the left shoulder affect you? And he makes the sly comment about it might affect you carrying your duffel bag into the stadium. Man, that was wild to me. And I know it got a little bit of reaction, but you combine that with, I saw Mac running off the field today where he didn't even talk to Doug. It looks like a failure across the board. And for Doug to go publicly and say the left shoulder is an injury tolerance or a pain tolerance issue, again, there's a lot of things you can question about Trevor Lawrence. You can't question that dude's toughness after last year, man. So to make a sly remark about how he carries his duffel bag, and look, if you're 7-2 and you say that, well, then yeah, that might be funny. Then there might be time for joke and laugh. At 2-7 and now 2-8, that's not funny.
Yeah,
guys like me, you're going to look at that, and that's a ridiculous comment. And then he goes on to call about pain tolerance. Man, it's bad. I'm telling you, this is Gus Bradley all over again. This is Mike Mularkey all over again, and I cannot believe we're here. But that is the reality. This feels like a Gus Bradley year.
Well, here we are. You can go hang out with Hacker on location though at Island Girl Cigar Bar on Gate Parkway. He, Coach Campo, and Leon Searcy will be breaking down more of the reactions from Jacksonville's game. So, Hacker, thanks again for joining. We'll see you here next Sunday after the Lions game.
I absolutely cannot wait for that. I'm going to mark my calendar. I will be here, and rest assured, depending on the coin toss, either first drive of the first quarter or first drive coming out of half, Gus, you heard it here first. The Jacksonville Jaguars will go 3 and out because that's what the Jaguars do. Let me leave you with this. It's a tradition on Duval Rundown. Since the start of the 2012 season, since Shad Khan bought the team, with today's loss, the Jacksonville Jaguars now have 62 wins and 143 losses. See you next week, man.
Losing us an NFL franchise in that time. Thanks, Hacker. Have a good one. All righty. We're going to hang out for a little bit and wait for Mia because, Doug was probably late to the presser given the conversation I'm assuming he had with Shad Khan after the game. And so I'm sure Mia will have some interesting things to say. So let's just hang out for a little bit before then. Let's get to some chat therapy, see if anyone has any questions. Someone was asking earlier, who do you guys want as general manager? I really don't have a response for this right now, and I probably won't until after the season ends, even if, let's say Balky and the full coaching staff are gone at the bye week. I still probably won't really be looking at general managers until January because there's a couple of names. I think there's this guy Ian Cunningham maybe with the Bears who's supposedly a pretty hot name, especially for the Jags job if it opens. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard to know who's going to be a good general manager. Sometimes there's guys that's I think Joe Hortitz is his name that went from Baltimore to the Chargers this most recent offseason. And he was a guy that myself and a decent amount of other media people were oh yeah, that's going to be a good general manager just because he's been on the next general manager lists or articles for the past several years now. And so I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell. And especially because you've probably heard that the NFL draft is a crapshoot and that you can't really rely on your own scouting. You have to understand that there's a lot of luck that goes into it. And that's why trading down is generally a good strategy to try to just get more picks and more swings at the bat. And so because the draft is so random and because that's such a big part of the general manager's role, it's just tough to tell who either – it's honestly kind of hard to tell who has been good general managers as opposed to just whether they lucked out or not in certain situations. But it's borderline impossible to tell who's going to be a good general manager. So that's a good question from D Cook on YouTube, but just won't have a real answer for you or a name for you for another couple of months. Reedy asked, sorry for not knowing, but why did we not keep Jenkins at safety? I think it was just completely a cap casualty. Jenkins was a team captain, I think the first year that he joined the Jaguars in 2022. It might have been 2021. But he was definitely a locker room leader. Anyone who's a fan could definitely tell the energy that he brought to the team and to the defense. I think he might have been the one that came up with the Jay Villance nickname for the defensive side. So yeah, from everything I know, Jenkins was amazing in the locker room and pretty solid on the field, especially when you compare it to what Jacksonville has gotten on the field from its safeties this year. But I think he was just costing a lot of money, and I think that it was more about Antonio Johnson than it was Jenkins, because Antonio Johnson was a 5th-round rookie last year, and he was playing mostly as a nickel on early down, so he was basically like a run-stopping cornerback. But I guess he played well enough that Balky in the front office thought it made a lot more sense to just cut ties with Jenkins and then have Antonio Johnson be the starter for pennies on the dollar compared to Jenkins' his contract. So it's kind of a similar situation to the Jags trading away Cam Robinson, since they can just play Walker Little for a lot cheaper. It's also similar to what could unfold this upcoming offseason if the Jaguars decide to move on from Christian Kirk, because they have a guy that's almost as effective for a fraction of the cost in Parker Washington. Movie Invader said, I think Ben Johnson may go to the Bears if they fire Mike Eberflus. I feel like that kind of depends on if they fire Poles or not, because there's been rumors where Ben Johnson isn't going to come to Jacksonville if Trent Baalke is still the general manager. I almost feel like it's probably the same way for Chicago. Obviously Ryan Poles is generally better received than Baalke is, but I don't know. He fleeced the Panthers, and what has he done other than that? But yeah, the Bears, there's going to be a lot of good jobs open this offseason, honestly. For head coaches, there's going to be the Jags, the Bears, the Cowboys, maybe the Eagles, obviously the Saints and the Jets. So there's this is going to be an interesting coaching cycle for sure. Let me text Mia and make sure she's going to get it in here. Ooh, Steve Boston said, get assistant general manager Ray Agnew from the Lions and bring Ben Johnson along with them. That'd be pretty interesting. I feel like the Lions have to have good assistant GM people, right? Or just good front office execs who are in line to become a general manager in the future, just because even if they've had some kind of interesting decisions, especially, I guess, mostly just drafting a linebacker and a running back in the first round 2 years ago. Yeah, but I don't know. The Lions front office seems very well run. So if the Jags ended up just picking someone from Detroit, then I would not be opposed to that. Ant Brown says, anyone who was taught under Ozzie Newsome. Yeah, that's fair. I think the Chargers, aka former Ravens guy I was talking about earlier, Joe Hortitz, falls under that category. Reedy said, can I just say BTJ had 3 targets? Isn't that shocking? 3 targets. Yeah, that is probably the stat of the game, or just the biggest takeaway that I have is that regardless of who's playing quarterback, regardless of how aggressive or unique the defense is just a failure to get Brian Thomas Jr. 3 targets and nothing more than that. William said on YouTube, William Torres, without his Super Bowl run, Doug is 49-58. Under 500 coaching is not going to get it done anywhere. Yeah, if you go to Pro Football Reference and just look at Doug's year-by-year coaching records, it's really been pretty bleh other than 2017. So we can get back to some chat therapy later, but right now we have got Mia O'Brien ready to join the show from the field. What's up, Mia? Can you hear me?
There we go. Yes, I can hear you. I don't have my AirPods, so hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you great.
And there's our fireworks. We love the fireworks. We didn't get many fireworks on offense, Gus, so at the very least, if I can provide them here on a live stream, that's all I can ask for.
Yeah, well, that's about all the fireworks we're going to have, because Hacker and I were talking about how the Jags, it felt kind of similar to last week to me, honestly, where it was a 1-score loss, but the game wasn't nearly as close as the score might have indicated, because the Jags had 3 turnovers, 3 interceptions, which is as many as they had in the rest of the season combined, but they didn't score any points off of that. And then they ended up having 3 turnovers in a row to end the game when they had several times to go out and win the game against the Vikings. Just what was, before we get to the locker room stuff and what you might have learned and picked up in the last 45 minutes, just what was your biggest reaction or takeaway?
Yeah, I think offensively, the frustration is certainly there. I know Doug Pederson just mentioned it when he met with reporters. Gabe Davis referred to the offense, used the word stagnant, and the vibe from the guys who've been here for a couple of years now, Anton Harrison, Evan Ingram, was that the only way you can get out of this is to just keep swinging. And Evan also just noted to us how important it is for them to feed off of Mac Jones's energy. That was part of the game plan, was they needed to rally behind Mac. They felt like they did. They put a good drive together, but ultimately, Marcel Robinson of Action News Jax just asked him, you guys finally had that fast start that you've been trying to have for weeks on end now. Is there any solace in that? And Evan just said no, because after that drive, nothing worked from there. And that's why I'm curious your take, Gus, because certainly you could argue that opening drive in which the Jaguars did score a touchdown was largely scripted. And I think the 12 personnel and the emphasis on having more 2 tight end sets, the fact that Brenton Strange and Luke Farrell got involved early and often, says to me that all of that was part of the game plan. And ultimately, when it came to matching the X's and O's of the Vikings defense, while certainly I asked Anton if the Vikings defense did anything they didn't expect, and he said no. It was the disguises, it was the blitz, it was everything we thought it would be, and we just failed to execute. So I'm curious your thought on, was the early success because it was scripted, and then when it came to those unscripted situations, perhaps in a roundabout way of saying this is validation for why Trevor Lawrence was paid $275 million this offseason?
I'm definitely feeling very validated, especially after last week's show where I was trying to stand up for Trevor Lawrence, and this comment section was just flooded with just stop defending Trevor Lawrence. Well, here we are. But yeah, I thought even if they did get use 12 personnel more in the first drive, especially, but more in this game compared to last week, and they had the opening drive was it successful, I honestly kind of think it was just noise. Like at a certain, if you're going to have a bunch of 17 opening drives in a season, you're bound to score a touchdown at least one of them, So they did have 4 chunk gains of 15 plus yards on that drive. And Mac had a nice throw to Gabe Davis before setting it up for the walk-in touchdown himself. But, I think that maybe it was well scripted, but maybe it was just noise, like I'm saying. And, it was just one good throw by Mac to Gabe Davis, a good run by Travis Etienne, a good run after the catch by Brenton Strange. And then I feel like there was one other play in there.
Luke Farrell had a grab.
Right. And so it was okay, great. You looked like professionals for one drive, but then obviously everything unfolded after that. And so I didn't think that even if the first drive was successful, I didn't think that they were necessarily doing anything that was amazing. It was just that the offense was happening to work on that drive, and then clearly it wasn't working the rest of the game. So before I ask you about Doug Pederson, just what was the vibes like in the locker room for the Jaguars in general? Because for the past 2 weeks now, you've actually said that the locker room vibes were much better than you expected when you were walking in. And so was it the same today, or is the ball kind of starting to deflate a little bit?
Yeah, it is, Gus. From my perspective, yes. This was the first time that we've gone up to players, and perhaps wisely, they've said, hey, I don't want to talk today. I need a second. I need to collect myself. Gus just disappeared. I think he's probably tending to a dog. Yes, there he is. Are you tending to a dog?
No, I'm just trying to get a light because my room got
you're good. I was like, I hope his dog's okay. No, I think that this was the first time I've gone into the locker room. Guys have been having spirited conversations, not yelling, not pointing the fingers, but guys are huddled together trying to figure this thing out. You have a sense of, hey, cool, calm, hey, this is what happened. Guys, again, that have had to kind of not mince their words, but pick and choose their words a little bit more carefully. Say, hey, come get me tomorrow in locker room. Come meet with me on Wednesday. I really don't want to talk right now. And that's their right. And a lot of times with a lot of these veteran guys, I appreciate it because it's them knowing that they may come off a little bit heated and they may say things that they don't want to say. And so I appreciate that they said, you know what, catch me on Wednesday, catch me tomorrow. My bad. I want to do what's best for everybody. And I appreciate that maturity, but that wasn't happening 2 weeks ago, even after a walk-off loss to the Green Bay Packers. And I think, yes, and I think a lot of it stems from the fact that this offense had 31 yards in the first half last week. They rallied in the second half, largely because of a scoop and score that I still don't understand what's the difference between a stumble and a fumble. That's a story for another time. And this week, ultimately, you did have your defense create 3 takeaways for you. and you got 0 points out of them. And that is the biggest issue with this team right now, which is the inability to play complementary football.
Yeah, it's really just been impressive how uncomplimentary they've been this entire season. Like, obviously, special teams gets into it, and we saw Logan Cook have a mistake a couple of weeks ago. And so, like, there's mishaps there too. But really, like, the offensive and defensive sides of the ball, it feels like every single half, even every single quarter, they're, like, not on the same page and not able to help each other out. This game, obviously, the defense, do you think it was maybe the best defensive game for the Jaguars this season, Mia? I think they they played pretty well in week 1, I thought, against the Dolphins, but they let up 3 massive plays that ended up kind of allowing the Dolphins to win. And then, obviously, there was the infamous Travis Etienne fumble. That was kind of the beginning of the end for the Jaguars season. But yeah, I was impressed because even taking away the 3 interceptions and coulda, woulda, shoulda been fourth, they were just all over what the Vikings wanted to do this entire day.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't know the final stat line, but when I came down from the press box here to the tunnel, Justin Jefferson had 4 catches for 54 yards, I want to say. If you had told me that at 11:30, I would tell you that the Jaguars won this football game. And I think that's where, rightfully so, there should be frustration because ultimately, I just asked Buster Brown, his first career interception, but then we talked big picture defense. And he said, ultimately, the game plan was to force Sam Darnold to throw it where his playmakers were not, AKA read between the lines, shut down Justin Jefferson, force him to throw the tight ends, but quote unquote manageable situations, and avoid those big play opportunities. And I think the Jaguars did that, to your point. There were no big plays by far and large. I think the longest play from scrimmage for the Vikings may have been like a 27-yard completion, which is still obviously a large chunk, but it's not the, 89-yard touchdown that Tyreek Hill had week 1. So it's improvement, and the 3 takeaways is improvement. But now you have this regression on offense. And I think that once again then goes back to the question of, all right, you really can't, and I know there's probably, I can't see the comments from my phone, but I'm sure there are those of you that are still trying to blame Trevor Lawrence for all of this.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't play today, and this is the offensive ecosystem that he operates within. They didn't change anything for Mac Jones, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, they didn't change the offensive line. They didn't change the skill players. Like, it's
they didn't change anything. They did a little bit more 12 personnel this week, which is like, okay, good for you, I guess. You get a small pat on the back. But yeah, it's funny too because Doug Pederson even said in a press conference last week, he's like, yeah, we're not going to be running like the same things that we run for Trevor Lawrence. These are 2 different quarterbacks. So I almost clipped that itself and being like, Doug Pederson's telling you right here that these 2 guys are not the same thing. But yeah, it honestly kind of did look like the same thing to me. That's like what's so worrisome. It's that not only did they like not really do anything that different against this defense, which is maybe the most unique defense in the NFL, but they didn't do anything after changing quarterbacks, which is the most important position in any sport. And so it's just bonkers and indefensible. And so to get to Doug Pederson, Hacker and I are like looking forward to next week's show just because we're expecting a slaughtering in Detroit. They had a really ugly game in Detroit. I think it was 2 years ago. And then after that game, they actually started to turn the season around. But I don't think Doug Pederson is going to be given the chance. What do you think?
I mean, I had people around the league texting me as this game was coming to a close, and they were arguing that it should be a fireable offense, what we saw out on the football field here today, if the offensive play of the Jaguars truly falls at the feet of Doug Pederson and, if you may, Press Taylor, which we've been told they're one and the same. And so if we've said it for weeks now, Gus, if Press is to get canned, Doug's probably going with him, because would he actually sit there and say to Shad Khan, yes, you can relieve Press of his duties, or yes, I will take play calling back, when he has continued to say the line of Press's offense is my offense and he's an extension of me. And so ultimately, if one goes, they're both going to go. And you can make the argument that after what we saw today, yeah, perhaps you have the scapegoat of, well, your quarterback was injured, so that's great. The same guy who, had to put his duffel bag on his non-throwing shoulder, and that's a problem. That guy's going to be the out this week. And look, Shad Khan doesn't like to make in-season changes, but if this thing continues to snowball, you may have no choice. And look, I don't believe in the coach bump, right? Yes, the New Orleans Saints won today after firing Dennis Allen earlier this week. I understand that. But ultimately, I do not foresee the Saints winning out the rest of the season. it's a short-term gain for a long-term goal, perhaps. I'm very curious to see if it even would come to pass next week, Gus. But certainly, yes, this was the most deflated locker room. But it's like so weird because when you talk to guys in the locker room, they're like, look, we know that we have talent. We're not executing and it's not happening at the right moment, at the right time in the game.
Yeah, I don't really have anything else. I can't believe I got 40 minutes into this and had something to say for the whole time. I mean, obviously, shout out to you and Hacker for helping out. But, yeah, this next 7 games for the Jaguars are going to be pretty interesting.
Because let's talk about that briefly before we go. I'd love to see the chat's reaction. I don't know how many of you are chiming in right now, but if Doug Pederson is not fired, if there is nothing done, and the Jaguars do lose to the Detroit Lions next week, what is the vibe then? Is it just complete apathy? Because at that juncture, is that really what you want as a franchise either?
I think that is what it is. And apathy would be like the worst thing. I feel like I saw a tweet from someone today that's like where the NBA is heading, which is like with so many of its star players getting injured all the time. It's like casual fans are just like kind of tuning in less and less and being less and less interested. And it's the same way in Jacksonville right now, where it's not even just because like, yeah, Trevor Lawrence is out with an injury, but like this team just isn't winning. They're 2-8 right now. And I think probably going to be set up with a top 5 pick if the season ended today. Their chances of making the playoffs going into this game was 3.3%, according to ESPN. So even if they still have a non-zero chance after this week, it's still pretty much a 0% chance. And so, yeah, I think apathy.
I would argue the one reason you can tune in is Brian Thomas Jr. and Tank Bigsby. Yeah. And Tank touched the ball, twice today? I mean, I know he got beat in pass pro really bad, that one rep. But, I mean, he's a reason to watch. Brian Thomas Jr. is a reason to watch, and Brian Thomas Jr. didn't have a catch until the 4th quarter.
Yeah, I actually got this question in my mailbag last week, which if anyone's interested, you can send your lingering questions to me via 1010XL social media channels, and I write up a quote-unquote midnight mailbag that goes up on Monday after each game. And so last week I got asked, like, genuinely, why should we be watching the Jags anymore? Because back in the Gus Bradley era, I was also told that, like, oh, we have young and developing players, and that's why you should watch. And I was like, yeah, that's fair. I mean, on one hand, Brian Thomas Jr. is just different. And I think that even if he only has 3 targets, I think that is a reason to tune in. But the 2 other reasons that I gave was one, just community, because it's fun watching the Jaguars with other people. We've got nearly 2,000 people in here right now. And so obviously I think if everyone was forced to watch their television screens for 3 hours with no one to vent to or talk to or cheer with, then the Jags just wouldn't really have any fans. And so, yeah, I think community is probably the biggest reason. Just go find somewhere to be miserable with other people. Don't just be miserable.
Join
into the Duval Rundown post-game chat. That's what we're here for.
Robert asked what my X/Twitter is. Yeah, it's just Gus_Logue, Logue. You can find the mailbag stuff on just at 1010XL on Facebook and Twitter. So
I do want to answer
Mia, you got anything else?
Yeah, I do want to answer to one comment. Someone asked, I think Duran asked about if Shad Khan comes to the games. He was at the game today. I said hello to Shad. I talked to Tony a little bit, but they both were here. They were very much both here in attendance. I can't say what they thought because I haven't spoken to them since the game ended, but both Shad and Tony Khan were both in attendance today.
All right. Well, I got one more thing that I want to address too. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to stall for a second and go back and find this comment.
I thought it was going to be your dog. I was like, oh no, the dog's getting in the way again.
Lonely Jags fan was going to bat for me being a Trevor supporter. And so Hella Libra said on YouTube, stat is the matter. Wait, the stat that matters is wins. Trevor sucks. I've watched every game since the start in 95. So I just want to congratulate you on being a ball watcher, but unfortunately, you don't get the ball nowhere tag. That goes to Lonely Jags fans for standing up for Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence doesn't deserve any of the blame. There you go. That's my final word. That's me, Brian Hacker was here earlier. You can catch him on the 5th quarter with Leon Searcy, Coach Campo. Check it out on 1010XL. We will be back on Duval Rundown on Tuesday at noon. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Peace out.